Hello everyone, welcome to Wisdom of Failure. Today we're going to explore a story about the dangers of making decisions in anger and the power of calm thinking when we're facing challenges. While we listen to the story, we'll also learn new words and how to make sentences with them. This will help us practice English in a fun and easy way, so stay with us till the end. Once upon a time in a faraway empire there was a young king named Alex. Alex had just inherited the throne at the age of 30 after his father's passing. Growing up, Alex was guided by a wise teacher named George, who taught him not only about the world but also about the values of kindness, patience, and wisdom. After his father's death, George became Alex's closest advisor, guiding him through the many challenges of ruling a king empire. George was now serving as the empire chief minister and Alex's trusted counselor. Everything in the empire was going smoothly, until one year an unexpected food crisis struck due to a mistake George made in the weather forecast. In his frustration and anger, Alex, without thinking twice, ordered George, his own mentor, to leave the empire and never return. With a heavy heart, George quietly obeyed, leaving the palace and the life he had known behind to start anew. George settled in a distant town, choosing a life as a humble farmer. Though he still had wealth, he opted for a simple life, connecting with the villagers and sharing in their daily struggles. George quickly earned the respect of the villagers, who came to him for advice on everything from farming issues to resolving disputes. Back in the empire, Alex was struggling. He missed George's wise counsel, especially as he faced complex decisions on his own. Gradually, Alex began to realize that banishing George was a mistake, a decision made out of anger rather than thoughtfulness. Regret greeted Alex, and he decided to send out soldiers to search for George and bring him back. Days turned into weeks, but there was no sign of him. The empire was large, and no one seemed to know where George had gone. Then Alex had an idea, inspired by the clever methods George once taught him. Alex decided to test if he could find George's wisdom somewhere in the empire. He ordered his soldiers to send a letter in a clay jar to the head of each village. The letter instructed each village leader to return the jar filled with wisdom within a month. If they failed, they would need to fill it with precious jewels. Instead, the jar and letter reached the village where George lived, and the village leader, puzzled by the strange request, quickly went to George for advice. Wisdom can't be put into a jar, George thought, and he knew the village didn't have enough jewels to fill it. Either the villagers grew fearful, worrying they might be punished for failing to fulfill the king's strange request. Turning to George with anxious faces, they pleaded, "Please help us. You are the only one who can find a solution to this." As George calmly sat among them, he reassured the villagers, saying, "Hand me the jar. I'll make sure it's filled with wisdom by the end of the month." The village leader asked, "What do you plan to do?" George just smiled and replied, "I'm not sure yet, but with time I'm certain a solution will come." The villagers trusted George's wisdom and left the jar with him, hopeful he would think of something. In the quiet of his farm, George pondered over the problem. Suddenly he noticed a small pumpkin vine growing nearby. An idea sparked in his mind. Gently he placed a tiny pumpkin inside the jar without cutting it off the vine. Day by day he watered it, and over time the pumpkin grew larger, filling the entire jar so that it couldn't be removed. Finally, George cut the vine, leaving the jar with the fully grown pumpkin inside. He sent the jar back to the empire just as the king had asked. When King Alex received the jar, he was amazed to see it filled with a giant pumpkin. Smiling, he said, "Growing a pumpkin this large inside a jar is the work of a wise mind." Instantly, he realized this clever solution could only belong to George. Without hesitation, Alex prepared to set out personally, determined to find George, apologize, and bring him back to the empire. So don't make decisions in the heat of anger. Strong emotions can cloud your judgment and lead to regrets. And second, take a moment to calm yourself before solving a problem. A peaceful mind gives rise to clear thinking, helping you find the best path forward. Remember, wisdom often comes from patience and understanding. Today we learned new words and sentences through this story. Remember, learning English can be fun when you practice regularly, so keep listening, learning, and growing. Make sure to Like, comment, and share how this story helped you improve your English. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.